Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is G, this is G's World, and today I will be doing part 3 of my my journey into Warhammer 40k. Let me switch so you guys can see. Alright, I'm back to Lutein 09, and I am going to be reviewing part 3. ELDAR, Rise and Fall of an Empire. So let's just dive right in, man. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
The ELDAR, created by the Old Ones, who are the most knowledgeable beings in the universe, but were destroyed in a fanatical genocide by the Necrons and Satan. The ELDAR stood victorious, the unlikely benefactors in a war of unimaginable proportions, and now found their race in complete dominion of the known universe. Now, just to mention again, as I did on the previous video, that the time we are dealing with here, as with much of the history in the 40k universe, is near speculation at best. After millions of years, facts and history are inclined to become cloudy. The ELDAR history is one steeped in mythology and legend, so it's fair to say that you could lend some artistic license around the events of this period. As the lore of 40k is also very complicated, we'll learn today about the ancient history of
I thought that was my little arrow from my mouse. I was like, why is it doing in the middle of my screen?
ELDAR up to the 41st millennium. I'll then cover their race of the current period in a separate video. The war in heaven was over, and the ELDAR stood unopposed in the universe. In this time we're speaking of the ancient ELDAR. This is an important distinction to make between the modern ELDAR of the 41st millennium. Ancient ELDAR held a different mindset and outlook on their lives, and with good reason. Reason that we'll look at in due course. The ancient ELDAR had been crafted and refined by the old ones for one purpose alone, and that was to destroy their enemy with vast psychic ability. It is possible that the ELDAR gods spoken of at this time were actually weapons created by the old ones for them to wield. This is the version that I subscribe to. As a result of their naturally powerful psychic ability from the old ones' intelligent design, the ELDAR are gifted with also unnaturally long lives by humanoid standards and intellects which would enable them to create some of the most precious and complex technological advances in the universe. The next events are particularly confusing. In essence, the ELDAR gods, which it appears were initially immense psychic weapons created by the ancient ELDAR with guidance from the old ones. They became living gods, such was their immense psychic energy and connection to the ELDAR. The ELDAR of the current day seem to have lost through the mists of time and their mythology this fact that the gods they worship were potentially created by themselves, albeit in their earliest, most ancient form, either directly or indirectly. Each of the gods was known to gift the ELDAR a trait and be part of their development. ELDAR mythology states that Azuran gave the ELDAR wisdom so that they may know themselves. Isha gave the ELDAR love so they may know one another. Vol gave the ELDAR the artifice as a means to make their dreams become realities. Lilith gave the ELDAR joy so they'd be happy in their lives. Kurnus gave them the ability to desire so that they would prosper. Muraheg gave the ELDAR foresight so that they would know their place in the world. And lastly, Cain gave the ELDAR anger so that they may have a means to defend their gifts. It then becomes even more complicated though. The ELDAR in their legends refer to a time of war between their own gods as the war in heaven. Now this is particularly confusing as you remember that the war between the old ones Necron and Satan is also referred to as the war in heaven. Now it seems likely that these events occurred during a period of cataclysmic war across the universe and at the same time have caused this period to have a blurred point of reference. Now when you consider this is all meant to have taken place some 60 million years ago, it seems very feasible that this would occur. The Eldar have focused more on their own gods in this time than the events between the Old Ones and Necron-Satan alliance. Given that the Eldar lost respect and communication with the Old Ones during the war, this would make sense, and that they potentially could lose some information about the period through the vast timescale and various events that have befallen them. Instead, they're focusing on the mythological aspect and their own gods, which are arguably of much more importance to the collective Eldar consciousness. The legend of the Eldar gods is very much one of mythology, so I'll cover that in a smaller subsidiary video. What I will say is that there was a period of strife amongst the Eldar gods pantheon. You'll hear that word a lot in reference to the Eldar gods. It simply refers to a council or circle. Think of the Greek gods of Olympus. Now, this dark period of bloodshed and war was not just among the gods, but also against the Eldar themselves. This not only divided the Eldar from their gods, ceasing their ability to guide them. This period was a disaster in many ways, but the whole series of events was caused by a misreading of foresight borne by one of the gods. Now, this miscalculation, in my opinion, actually doomed not only the gods themselves, but also the entire Eldar race. And I'll elaborate on all this in a future mythology video and what its implications were. Now, as I said before, the origin of the Eldar gods is one of speculation, but I believe that these were weapons gifted by the Old Ones, or at least guided in creating them for the Eldar, and were masses of incredible psychic power. But when eventually the Eldar were left without the influence of the Old Ones, who had by then been extinguished, these masses changed from mere weapons to sentient life forms, the gods of Eldar civilization. Remembering that these powers were first created to combat the Satan, gods powerful enough to devour stars themselves. It stands to reason that the psychic weapons created for or by the ancient Eldar could transition to powerful entities within the Eldar race, given their immense psychic force. Whilst we refer to them as weapons, it is not to say necessarily that they would have just been offensive. They could have been shielding, protective, or informative. And given the specific nature and description of each of the Eldar gods, I'm inclined to think that this is the case, and that these so-called weapons each had a function to bolster the Eldar in combating essentially what was an invincible army. So just to recap, during the earliest days of the Eldar, the Old Ones had helped them to develop and craft their psychic powers, knowledge, and skills. Over time though, and because of the war in heaven, the Eldar were left more and more to themselves to develop and advance. When the Old Ones were destroyed, they were at the point where they left entirely to forge their own way forward in the universe. After the war in heaven, that was the war of unimaginable proportions. Once that finished, and the Eldar had defeated the Necrons, the Satan were shattered across the universe by the Necrons, who then retreated into their tomb worlds, leaving the Eldar as the most powerful force in the universe, with forces able to crush any who opposed them. An obvious comparison to this would be the Roman Empire in its advancement and strength over any other society at this time. Now, this situation obviously leaves the Eldar in an advantageous position in terms of societal advancement and growth.
That dude looks bad right here. Second guy. I like the way he has his swords, man, like on his forearm. Reminds me of what's that guy's name? Mortal Kombat. Baraka. Yeah. That's dope.
And grow they did, both in their technology, population, and most importantly, their collective psychic power. Another problem at this time for the Eldar would be their gods, who were powerful psychic creatures and had up until now aided and guided the Eldar. Some of the more powerful ancient Eldar, like the earliest of their race, spoke to these gods in first-person terms and even fought against them. But all of this was to end. The gods were no longer entities that were able to assist and help shape the Eldar as they once had. Now they could only be contacted through spirit stones and help guide them in a much lesser way. So the Eldar would now enter a period of previously unequaled growth, a golden age in which they would spread their knowledge and culture wider than any that had gone before it. Such was their own dominance that over millennia they filled themselves with a great arrogance, a sense that all other races were below them, and all around them stood evidence of this, both in their technological success, their psychic powers, the beauty with which they inhabited new worlds far and wide.
It reminds me of that old saying, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's what it's sounding like the ELDAR started becoming.
They were at the pinnacle of achievement, both technologically, culturally, and in the size of their empire. They not only lived long lives, but when they did die, their souls would return to the collective ether to be reborn into a new body, a psychic reincarnation. This enabled the ELDAR to achieve a height of cultural technology that would nor could ever be equaled again. Over the vast periods of time involved here, literally millions of years, the ELDAR reigned supreme. Their strength, pride, arrogance, and avarice grew. Their sensibility and self-control waned and became less and less. Their race was so advanced that they no longer needed to perform any physical or menial tasks, nor did they need to work to support their society. Their only causes were either self-betterment, the pursuit of knowledge, and most often of all, to indulge their desires, no matter how extreme. Now, whilst this may seem a deplorable thing, you must remember that the ELDAR have far more powerful and overbearing emotions than humans, and this would lead them to indulging in ever more perverse ways to satisfy their desires, both through violence, cruelty, torture, sex, depravity. It became harder and harder for these extreme fanatics dedicated to dark pleasures to satisfy their decadent desires. So their acts became more violent and more creative. Soon,
well, yeah, that's just go into the rabbit hole, man. It sounds like these guys just jumped into the rabbit hole without a parachute. They weren't coming back.
Streets were literally running with blood, and the insane bloodlusting roar of the swathes of citizens could be heard throughout the ELDAR Empire. Now, as you become desensitized to something over time, you have to push it further and further to achieve any enjoyment from it at all. And the ELDAR in their lives, where they had literally nothing other to do at this time than pleasure addiction, was like a disease infecting the whole of the ELDAR race. The ELDAR slaughtered one another at the slightest whim and feasted on the corpses of their fellow kin. All the while, the worlds burned around them. Cults dedicated to nightmarish depravity grew rapidly across the ELDAR society. Whole lands fell to the different aspects of arcane knowledge and sensual excesses. Billions upon billions of ELDAR, numbers greater than you can possibly imagine, spread across worlds throughout the universe, all cascading towards the darkest epitome of emotional worship. Even before this time, it had been prophesied that the ELDAR would fall. The Old Ones warned the ELDAR about it, but their predictions and warnings were forgotten, dismissed, and ignored over time. However, it is not to say that all was a hopeless mess of suffering and exorbitant pleasures. Whilst many had slid into chasms of depravity, there were many who focused still on improvement, development, and the core tenets of the ELDAR race. Discoveries by the Imperium of Man have found hints at just how far the ELDAR had advanced with their technology. One of these ancient devices enabled the user to literally will anything they could imagine into existence, drawing on their vast psychic powers. If you could imagine legions of ELDAR guardians that would appear and be real and physical and have mass, you could build endless streams of fleets, even whole cities. Whatever your imagination could be, you could create it using this highly advanced device.
Wow.
But on discovery of this device, it was deemed unusable. It had been tainted by the forces of chaos, of darkness. The idea of using such a device of such devastating power, that whilst it had been touched by chaos, is an unthinkable one for the Imperium. It goes to show, though, just how far the ELDAR had developed, and who knows what other advantages of similar genius they had created, but have since lost. This period of wonder and decadence, however, could not last. Some saw it coming, although perhaps not quite understanding the gravity of what was to come. A group of Eldar known as Exodites concluded that the Eldar had grown to disgusting excess, and so left the homeworlds to live on fringe planets in a more sustainable, pure existence. At this time, a great many more of the Eldar began to grow uneasy with the numbers and severity of the degradation of their society. Their seers, who had powerful precognition, warned that this dark path would lead surely to evil and suffering for the entire race. Yet more Eldar left the homeworlds of their empire, considering the remaining society unsalvageable and beyond help. They built great starships so massive they were near artificial planets. These are referred to as craft worlds. Some of the strongest Eldar stayed on the homeworlds to selflessly try and alter the path their race had taken, believing it to be not too late to save their society of beauty from whatever horrors would lay ahead. Surely the Eldar could not be destroyed. How could the Guardians of the Galaxy fall when they had the most advanced technology, the most knowledge and power? So you see, the ancient Eldar had drifted from guidance by the Old Ones too early. And despite the warnings from the Old Ones, the sense of what could happen was never truly instilled into them. This, combined with the fact that their own gods took over as the primary religion within the Eldar, meant they lost and ignored the truth of what they could face if they did not control their extremely powerful emotions. Remember that the Eldar were created for one purpose: to destroy the Necrons and Satan through the use of psychic power and warp manipulation. They all have a powerful link to the warp, this parallel dimension of malleable energy. Over millions upon millions of years of sliding towards depravity, the Eldar's psychic emanations began to create form. This was continually added to and strengthened as things became progressively worse in the Eldar Empire. Souls of departed Eldar cultists and sacrifices forming a massive ball of negative psychic energy. This would cause such an imbalance within the warp dimension, it would actually create the immense psychic storms which humanity at this time would define as the Age of Strife. Without understanding it, they actually had a massive effect on other races at the time. The Eldar still had their webways to travel through the universe, but for any other races, interstellar travel and communication was rendered impossible by the high level of disturbance in the warp energy. This would last for millions of years and a hugely disruptive event for many other races. So, thanks for that, Eldar. But despite the most selfless efforts of the strongest Eldar back on Homeworld, and the cause for the endless emotional excesses to end, it barely abated. It became worse and worse, a downward spiral of disastrous proportions. Now, to any big society, this kind of horrific abuse would be a problem, but it was worse than could have been imagined for the Eldar. This mass of psychic energy that had been growing in the warp was now to reach a point of criticality. It would explode as it transformed inert psychic energy to a living consciousness of pure hate, suffering and decadence, a reflection of the Eldar's millions of years of societal abuse and hedonism given nightmarish form. The psychic scream of the birth of Slaanesh was to be so powerful it would literally rip the fabric of the universe in two. It tore the souls of the Eldar within 1,000 light years, slaughtering the greatest number of Eldar in an instant. No one knows the figures involved in this loss, but it could be no less than trillions of lives, not to mention all of their homeworlds, and some of the craftworlds who had not even travelled far enough were annihilated in an instant. Their research and technology destroyed, the wonders in their culture which had stood for millennia obliterated. The Eldar gods, who despite being separated from the Eldar still cared and protected their followers, tried to combat and defeat Slaanesh, but all were slain or shattered, apart from just a couple of their gods who managed to escape the horror. The Eldar had truly lost everything in an instant. Only those who sheltered at distance in the wraithbone hulls of the craftworlds and Exodite planets were spared, leaving a mere fragment of the Eldar behind. The Eldar race did not just fall at this time, it was nearly wiped from existence. The only other survivors were ironically the Dark Eldar. I'll make mention of this specific Eldar group another time, but the Dark Eldar were essentially a cult or a mix of cults who worshipped the most purely depraved side of the Eldar. They were part of the many who orchestrated the fall of the Eldar. They had created a home for themselves within the Eldar webway, and this protected them from the immense shockwave as Slaanesh came into being. But this was only the beginning. The horror of what had occurred would not only haunt the Eldar for many millennia, but it would also unleash unseen nightmares into the reality of the world. Until this time, dark forces from within the warp could only transition to reality by channeling themselves through a psyker or being summoned as so. With the warp and reality torn apart, these two now merged, and the horrors of the warp could easily bleed into the material universe, corrupting, destroying and ravaging. It is also said that the Eldar homeworlds still exist, lost within the realm of the warp and chaos, suffering a never-ending nightmare of their own making of pure demonic suffering for any Eldar who remain there.
Damn.
The tear in the warp dimensional reality would be known from this point onward as the Eye of Terror, and gave birth to the gateway for the myriad of forces known as Chaos. This devastating event had a wide-reaching effect on all races in the galaxy and was far from over in the history of the universe of 40k. Since this time of darkness, which the Eldar refer to as the Fall, it is spoken of understandably with sadness and humiliation. The Eldar are now broken and a scattered race, lacking a sense of unity and coordinated objective. The Exolite world saw all of these events confirm that their choice to abandon the ways of technology and hedonism was the right one, and consequently they've slipped into a more primitive technological level of subsistence and just existence. Happy in its simplicity and with no interest for the power that caused their destruction. The survivors of the Eldar homeworlds who had foresight enough to abandon their planets now drift through the stars in colossal nomad fleets, and the more strict and organised of these are the craft worlds. Created prior to the fall with the mission to preserve the true Eldar way of life, they are loaded with life forms, culture from their planet in both religion, biology, technology and politics. Each of these craft worlds remains independent of the others, and they have no commitments to one another. They will often ally one another in times of need, but their society is very much shattered from the days of the ancient Eldar and is just a shadow of its former glory. The process of reincarnation that the Eldar once revered is also no longer possible, as they discovered after the fall that Slaanesh would snatch and devour their souls at the point of death. This prospect brings utter terror to the Eldar, where once they did not fear death, as they knew their spirit would be reincarnated and their life's knowledge preserved, now it could be ripped and consumed by the chaos god Slaanesh. To counter this horror, the Eldar developed spirit stones. These are the red orbs you'll see adorning Eldar armour, vehicles and weapons. The purpose is to absorb and store an Eldar soul at the point of death, so that it can be then placed into a Craftworld infinity circuit as a life source of information for the Eldar, and to save that soul from Slaanesh, ever watching, always desiring. Now the Eldar have been greatly changed by the fall, and their society is still reeling from the sheer scale of the horror it created for itself. And all the while Slaanesh is constantly stalking, they can never escape, and that's what they fear more than anything. But Eldar prophecies state though that one day their gods, some of whom were consumed and destroyed by Slaanesh, others were lost long ago during the Eldar War in Heaven, it is said that they will one day rise again as the saviours of the Eldar, to see them take their place as the rulers of the galaxy once again.
Commercials.
Taxes was paying the price.
Whilst this might seem a hope of a doomed race, it's not out of the realms of possibility. The Eldar are one of the most powerful races when it comes to psychic powers, and the Eldar gods, as you remember, were weapons designed by the Old Ones to combat the Satan. So it's not somehow out of the realm of possibility that there's some truth to this. The Eldar gods could recombine, resurrect from the depths of the warp. If it were to happen, then perhaps this period of ruin among the Eldar would be viewed more as penance than actually as ruin. Now the Eldar had been shattered by these events and were left significantly weakened. To date, their fall had the largest impact obviously on themselves. But it's worth to keep in mind that the ELDAR were the ones who originally caused the Necrons to retreat into their tomb worlds. They had since then grown in strength many times over. But since the fall, all of this was lost, leaving them significantly weaker and more scattered than ever at the end of the War in Heaven. This could still have far-reaching consequences as the universe of the 41st millennium faces new threats from the awakening Necron and the invasive Tyranid hives. The ELDAR's story is one which is far more significant than sometimes is given credit, and whilst many other empires are stronger than the ELDAR in the current time, none are even close to what the ELDAR had achieved with their own. The reality of the other younger and less powerful races such as mankind, Tau, Orcs, facing some of the most nightmarish forces in the universe is a sobering prospect. The ELDAR, if their prophecies of godlike resurrection and intervention prove accurate, could be the last true hope for the universe.
Wait.
And intervention prove accurate. The ELDAR, if their prophecies of godlike resurrection and intervention prove accurate, could be the last true hope for the universe.
So the original ELDAR, not the ones that
we'll be moving on from the ELDAR now to look at mankind and the Imperium and their place in the universe.
Being resurrected.
But we will revisit the ELDAR in the future videos to look at their society, their weapons, their gods, and much more.
161.
So guys, please leave your thoughts below, and as always, please support me by rating the video, commenting, and checking out my previous content.
Subscribe.
I need as much support as possible with this series, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time when we learn more about the future of human history.
Very nice, man, very nice. Let me see. This one. Alright. I was looking up some stuff over here, man, while this was playing. Let's see. One of the first things that popped into my mind while watching this was an episode from SG-1. I guess it's the Devil You Know, Papa Sports Core. It was like the Devil Planet, man. Sokar. I think that was his name. It's been a while, man, since I've seen Stargate. In fact, I need to get back into it. Yeah, there he is. Sokar, this guy. I'm gonna click on this guy. Sokar. Yeah, he was like the devil. He had this planet, whatnot, and Apophis like resurfaced there when we all thought he was dead. But yeah, that's what it reminded me of that planet. Just like a demon planet, you know, just everybody and everything in perpetual hell at all times. And then this too, I had to look this up. Slaanesh. Yeah, I'm a little confused, but yeah, here's a video. It's on there. I don't know what number this is though. It might be in this. I'm not gonna go through this. 161. But yeah, I can see it right here. It's from Lutein 09, so I'm sure I'm gonna run into it. The end of Slaanesh. Question about that is, when she was born, she, like, her psychic energy just like killed a lot of the Eldar, the evil ones. A few, like the Dark Eldar, stayed alive. Don't know how, because I mean, if this chick can reach that far out into the galaxy and the universe, how were they, you know? How were they spared? You know, what they do, like grab some of the Eldars and use them as shields. What's going on? I'll eventually learn. And then I went and looked up this Lilith Hesperix. I don't remember what the other ones were. Because there was what, 5 or 6, I think, or 7 people that gave the Eldar their wisdom, their strength, all that stuff. Like the last one, because I remember the last one. I thought it was this, but that's not that. That's another thing too. I'm gonna dive into this as time goes on. But I guess this is the guy, Tulsa Kane. The dude mentioned like somebody Kane at the end. It gave him anger or hatred. Yeah, man, very interesting, man. Oh, and was it Shang Tsung? Because they were scared of Slanesh at their death, and they were worried about the Slanesh coming in and snatching their souls. That's what reminded me of. Well, when he mentioned that, it reminded me of Shang Tsung. It's like, your soul is mine. Yeah, very interesting, man. I'm gonna be at this for a while. And definitely, I've been shopping around too, just getting familiar with what's out there. I still haven't gone to the comic book store. It's been pretty cold out here in Chicago lately. In fact, I think it's like, no, it's 27 right now. We got some snow earlier today, and it's supposed to be like in the lower 20s all the rest of the week. But I'll get out there. It's not too far, you know. Go check it out. In the meantime, I've just been surfing the net and, you know, checking out stuff on eBay. And so far as one character, or rather race, that I was introduced to in the beginning was the Tau from Fire Warrior. I was looking at their t-shirts and clothing and stuff like that, just to see what I can, you know, start collecting. Oh, I'm signed up. Never mind. I ran CC Cleaner earlier. But yeah, very interesting. I'm loving this so far. Some wild stuff. Also, got my tablet out. I'm gonna start making notes because a lot of this stuff, like, I'm forgetting, but it's gonna take time for me to absorb all this. But eventually I'll get into it. And, like, you know, like with anything else, like with for me, Star Trek, Star Wars, Stargate, those three genres, I could sit with anybody for hours. Like, I know the lore, the backstories, every episode, the movies, like, you know, and that's what's gonna happen eventually, you know, with Warhammer 40K. It's just I jumped on it at 51, you know. Star Trek, Stargate, and all that other stuff I grew up on, so obviously I know a lot about it. Plus, I still watch it. In fact, I'll probably watch Deep Space Nine again after I'm done with this, uploading this video. But very interesting. I'm looking forward to more. The next one's actually going to be very long. I'm looking at it right here. It's an hour and 27, which is fine. Probably go get me some popcorn and just chill with some snacks and, you know, plan ahead. But for the most part, very interesting. I'm looking forward to more. So yeah, with that said, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, drop your comments, suggestions down below. Subscribe. Don't hit the notification bell though. Me personally, I don't like it. But if you know, you do you. Had a situation with an old account where I would just sign up to like a bunch of different channels, and after a while, man, I was getting like a ding like every 2-3 minutes, you know. And I learned after that, like, yeah, just turn on notifications for certain channels. Otherwise you get inundated with just a lot of alerts. But yeah, thumbs up, subscribe, leave your comments, and take care of yourselves. And I will catch you in the next one. Peace.